Today is Wednesday, January 24th, 2024. My last flight was more than 3 weeks ago on January 3. During this time, I had multiple scheduled flights cancelled due to bad weather and the Scouts flying camp, which lasted from January 8 to January 12, to which I volunteered. So I did a fourth solo that looks very much like my third one today. It consisted of a pre-solo check followed by 4 solo circuits. And I also took the pre-area solo written exam. After completing my third solo on January 3, the plan was that my fourth solo would be door-to-door. However, a big gap between that flight and today meant that I needed a check ride to assess my current skill and address any regression. In today's flight, Greg flew with me as CFI. Despite the big gap between flights, I felt good. I had done a lot of imaginary flying in the previous day, so I didn't have to dig deep into my memory to remember radio calls, checklist items, critical speeds, etc. I'd booked 2 flights today, one at 8 a.m. and another at noon, both on Alpha Hotel. Now remember the issue with the RPM gauge on Alpha Hotel, which you can find out or learn about in hour 24? Finally, the mechanics decided that the gauge was under reading and would need replacement, and they chose to do this work immediately, which meant that Alpha Hotel would not be available for my booking. So Greg got me on Julia Bravo Charlie for the 8 a.m. flight, but I had to cancel the noon one because it wasn't available. After the morning flight, I also took the pre-area solo written exam. For the hour 29 flight, ATIS reported this.
Camden Information Alpha, runway 06, wind variable at 3 knots, okay, temperature 20, QNH 1013, on first contact with Camden Ground Tower, notified of Information Alpha.
The fourth circuit solo is very similar to the previous 3, except that the student completes 4 circuits, including 3 touch and goes and 1 full stop landing. My fourth solo was supposed to be door-to-door, as you already know, meaning that I would complete the entire flight without the instructor being in the cockpit. However, as I mentioned, due to bad weather and the plane being unavailable due to the Scouts flight camp, I have been unable to fly in the last 3 weeks. So today I needed to do a circuit solo check with Greg before being allowed to fly solo. And given that we can't fit a solo check and an entire hour-long solo in 1 hour, today's fourth solo is a slightly longer version of my third solo from January 3. I now have a new checklist item on my checklist, A game on. Just a little reminder that I should be ahead of the plane and fully engaged from the ground. Takeoff was pretty good. In the first turn to crosswind, Greg suggested I use more right rudder to better coordinate the turn. Aside from that, my flying was good. Tolerances for altitude and speeds were acceptable. I did 1 normal, 1 flapless and 1 glide simulated engine failure approach, followed by a full stop. 3 circuits in total. This gave me more time for the solo circuits. Greg received permission from tower to stop at the runner bay across holding point Delta, where he gave me my solo instructions. He got out of the plane and I taxied straight to holding point Alpha. I radioed ready for solo circuits and I was cleared to take off.
Camden Tower, Julia Bravo Charlie at runway 06, holding point Alpha, ready for solo circuits.
Bravo Charlie, Camden Tower, runway 06, cleared for takeoff.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 06, holding point Alpha, Julia Bravo Charlie.
I ended circuits mode and followed the script to the letter. I remember specifically in circuit 2 that I reached circuit altitude at the start of the crosswind leg instead of usually the end, because the plane was lighter, as Greg wasn't in the plane, in the right seat. And I was airborne also much sooner than a takeoff from stationary. Also, have a look at the Flight Radar 24 track. Notice that my downwind legs overlapped almost perfectly in the last 2 circuits. I was very surprised and content with myself when I saw this. I'm striving to fly perfect rectangular and consistent circuits, and in this case, for the first time, at least one side of the rectangle was near perfect. The landings were also decent, a little hard but controlled and safe. After landing, I taxied to the Bowser where Greg met me. Now, one thing that I noticed when I reviewed the video was that ATC instructed me to taxi to parking and monitor ground. By that, ATC meant that I should switch my radio to the ground frequency. Although I did taxi to the parking, I didn't switch to the ground frequency, and I also didn't read the entire instruction back. I only acknowledged taxi to parking.
Bravo Charlie, taxi to parking, monitor ground.
Taxi to parking, Julia Bravo Charlie.
So, note to self, listen better to ATC instructions, do a full readback and act on instructions. While working on my circuit solos, the next big item in the RPL syllabus is the area solo. This is a solo flight in which I fly the plane to the Camden training area, where I conduct a few basic maneuvers, including turns, descents and climbs. There are also navigation and radio ATC call components. Before I can be cleared for a solo flight to the training area, I must pass the relevant written exam. I passed a similar exam in hour 13 ahead of my circuit solo. The pre-area solo exam consists of 30 multiple choice questions that I must answer in 60 minutes. To pass this exam, I have to score 70% or better. So I prepared for this exam by studying from the Flying Training Manual book, which includes a sample exam. I studied and repeated the sample exam several times until I consistently got 100%. So after my fourth solo, I felt confident when I walked into the exam room. Greg gave me the test, the En Route Supplement Australia, or ESRA as it's called, and the AIP books, plus the VTC maps for Sydney. After a few seconds of looking at the exam, I had this sinking feeling that I wasn't ready for it. The first 10 or so questions were about radio calls for departures and arrivals that I had never done or practiced. They also required using the VTC chart, which I had only casually looked up to now. Many of the other questions were for mechanical issues that I barely remembered from RPL test 10 months ago. However, the second half of the test was similar to the one that I did in the sample exam. So I did those questions first and my confidence started building up. I continued with the radio call questions. I dug deep into my memory because I remembered Greg making these calls at the start of my training to get us to the training area and back. And I picked the more logical and reasonable answers. So I finished the exam with 5 minutes to spare, and my gut feeling was that perhaps I had passed. Greg was briefing another student at the time, so I left the answer sheet on his desk and I left. The next day, Greg called me to let me know that I had passed with an 80% score, and that was much better than what I expected. I don't know which questions I got wrong, but we'll debrief at some point in the future to plug those knowledge gaps. Given that the Scouts have grounded the planes while an investigation for the accident on the afternoon of January 24 is underway, I don't know when I'll be flying next. I've written about this accident on my hour 29 log on my website, but I didn't feel comfortable talking about this in this YouTube video. So please go over to the website if you want to know about what happened and what I know, which is not much anyway. And you'll find the link to my hour 29 log in the comments below. This means that my next flight will be similar to today's, i.e. a pre-solo check with Greg, and if I'm cleared for a solo, then I'll continue with a few solo circuits. I'll continue to work on the theory, which includes things like just radio calls, maps, navigation, and aircraft-specific operations. And I'm also considering my RPL certification, which requires me to work on the knowledge deficiencies that were revealed and listed in my RPL exam outcome. Most of them relate to meteorology, so I have bought the Aviation Theory Meteorology book to do some reading. And of course, I'll be working on Peter's flight log. I've got a lot of summaries to record, edit and publish. If you like this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you won't miss any of my future flight logs. Just click on the subscribe button below this video. And of course, you can also head over to my detailed flight training log pages on the Tech Explorations website. In those pages, I document in detail all of my experiences and learnings from each one of my training flights. These logs contain a goldmine of information for any aviation student or anyone interested in aviation. Until next time, I wish you clear skies and safe landings.